The late afternoon sun bathed the quiet suburban street in a golden glow, washing over neatly trimmed lawns and rows of identical houses that stood like watchful sentinels. It was the kind of neighborhood where children rode their bikes without fear, where sprinklers hissed gently in the summer air, and where neighbors waved politely from their porches. At least, that was the illusion. Beneath the surface, tension simmered, unspoken, invisible to an outsider, but felt by anyone who lived there long enough. Darius Johnson, tall and broad-shouldered, carried himself with a calm assurance that came from years of discipline. He had learned long ago not to draw unnecessary attention to himself. On this particular afternoon, he was simply unloading groceries from the back of his SUV. Bags rustled as he set them down near his driveway, pausing to stretch his back before heading inside. To anyone else, it was an ordinary task. But for Darius, moments like this carried weight. He knew how quickly ordinary could turn extraordinary in neighborhoods like this one. Just across the street, Patricia Green was watching. Patricia, the self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association, had made a name for herself by patrolling the neighborhood as if it were a personal kingdom. Mid-50s, blonde bob stiff with hairspray, and lips always pursed in disapproval, she thrived on finding faults. Whether it was grass cut half an inch too long or a trash can left out an hour late, Patricia made sure everyone knew who was in charge. When her gaze fell on Darius, something hardened in her expression. She narrowed her eyes, clutching the clipboard she carried everywhere as if it were a weapon. Her steps were sharp, heels clicking against the pavement as she marched across the street. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, her voice shrill and demanding. Darius turned, surprised but not unsettled. He offered a polite nod. "Afternoon." Patricia didn't return the greeting. Instead, she stopped at the edge of his driveway, her eyes scanning him as though trying to place him. "What exactly are you doing here?" she demanded, arms crossing tightly over her chest. Darius blinked, caught off guard by the question. He glanced at the grocery bags around his feet, then back at her. "I'm unloading my groceries." Her tone sharpened. "Don't get smart with me. I asked what you're doing on this property." The edge in her voice was unmistakable, the kind that carried not just suspicion but something heavier, uglier. Darius felt it but chose not to react. He kept his tone measured. "This is my property." Patricia's eyes narrowed further, disbelief flashing across her face. "No, I don't think so. I know everyone who lives here. You don't belong in this neighborhood." From the corner of his eye, Darius noticed a curtain twitch across the street. Neighbors were watching already. It didn't surprise him. Patricia's confrontations had a way of becoming public entertainment. "I've lived here for 2 years," Darius said evenly. "With my wife and kids." Patricia let out a short, sharp laugh. "Nice try. I haven't seen you at a single HOA meeting, and I would know if you lived here." "Not everyone has the luxury of attending your meetings," Darius replied. He kept his voice calm, though a muscle in his jaw tightened. By now, another neighbor had stepped out onto their porch. Then another. Conversations hushed, attention drawn to the escalating scene. Patricia, sensing her audience, lifted her chin higher. "Look," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "I'm not trying to cause trouble. But if you don't leave this property right now, I'll have to call the police. We can't have strangers lurking around here. It's unsafe for the children." Darius stood his ground, shoulders squared but posture non-threatening. He didn't move, didn't flinch. His silence was louder than her accusations. At that moment, Robert, the neighbor from 2 houses down, walked over. Middle-aged, easygoing, and well-liked, Robert raised a hand in greeting. "Hey, Darius. Need a hand with those bags?" Patricia's head whipped around, her glare cutting toward Robert. "You know him?" she demanded. "Of course I do," Robert said, frowning. "He's my neighbor. Lives right here. With his family." "What's the problem, Patricia?" But Patricia was undeterred. "Don't be fooled, Robert. He doesn't live here. I've been running this HOA for 15 years. I know every face. And this one, she jabbed a finger toward Darius, doesn't belong. Robert sighed, shaking his head. You're making a mistake. Darius bent to pick up another bag, refusing to let Patricia's accusations derail him. But inside, he felt the familiar weight pressing on his chest. He had seen this before, assumptions made, voices raised, eyes narrowing. And he knew where it could lead. As Patricia pulled out her phone with dramatic flair, announcing loudly that she was calling the police, Darius closed his eyes for a brief moment. He told himself the same words he always did when faced with moments like this: stay calm. Stay patient. Truth will outlast ignorance. But as the first siren wailed in the distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was only the beginning. The sharp, metallic wail of a distant siren faded into the suburban silence as Patricia lowered her phone, smugness radiating from her stiff posture. She crossed her arms, as though she had already won, as though Darius was moments away from being dragged off his own driveway in handcuffs. Neighbors gathered closer now, some with their phones held high, recording the scene. Others stood with folded arms, eyes darting between Patricia and Darius, waiting for the confrontation to explode. It wasn't every day that the neighborhood queen staged one of her infamous spectacles. Darius bent to pick up another grocery bag, refusing to let Patricia's accusations disrupt his rhythm. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of rattling him. But the weight of her stare pressed heavy on his shoulders, an accusation louder than her words. I said, Patricia snapped, voice sharp enough to pierce the humid air, you don't belong here. You think you can just walk into this neighborhood and pretend you own a house? Not on my watch. Darius straightened, bag in hand, and met her glare with steady eyes. I'm not pretending. This is my home. Patricia scoffed. Please. You don't expect me to believe that, do you? You haven't been to a single HOA meeting. Not one community event. And suddenly, here you are? No. Something isn't right. Robert stepped closer, frowning deeply. Patricia, enough. He lives here. His kids play with mine. Melissa's his wife, you know, the one who brings casseroles to the block parties you're too busy scolding people at to notice? Patricia whipped her head toward Robert, her lips curling. Don't get involved, Robert. You've always been too soft. This is about protecting the neighborhood. We can't let just anyone wander in and claim to live here. Just anyone? Robert echoed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean Darius, who's literally been here for years? Who pays the same dues as everyone else? The guy who shovels your sidewalk when it snows? A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking toward Patricia, then back to Darius. They knew Robert was right. But no one else spoke up. Not yet. Patricia's face reddened, but she refused to back down. She jabbed a finger toward Darius, her voice rising. Mark my words, you're lying. And when the police get here, they'll set this straight. You can't just walk in here and... Darius raised a hand, calm but firm. Enough. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The crowd stilled. Even Patricia hesitated for a fraction of a second before regaining her bluster. I've told you, he said evenly. This is my home. My name is on the deed. My wife and children live here with me. If you don't want to believe me, that's your choice. But threatening me on my own property isn't just wrong, it's harassment. Patricia's jaw dropped, but before she could respond, the screen door creaked open. Melissa stepped out, her face pale, their two children peeking nervously from behind her legs. Darius, she called softly, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his features softening. It's okay, Mel. Go back inside. But Patricia seized the moment. Aha! So this is the family you've roped into your story, she sneered. How convenient. Melissa's face flushed with indignation, but she bit back her words. Their kids clutched her hands, wide-eyed, sensing the tension in the air. Robert had had enough. He stepped forward, his tone sharper now. Patricia, stop it. You're humiliating yourself. But Patricia wasn't listening. She raised her voice louder, projecting to the crowd. We can't ignore this. If we let people like him slip in, what's next? Break-ins? Stolen mail? Unsafe streets? I won't let it happen. The words hung in the air like a poisonous fog. A few neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Some shifted their weight, uncomfortable with Patricia's choice of words. But no one else spoke. Silence, heavy and complicit, wrapped around them. Darius exhaled slowly, his patience tested but not broken. He turned his gaze across the circle of faces watching him, recording him, silently judging him. For a moment, his eyes lingered on his children, peeking from behind their mother, confusion etched on their young faces. That was what hurt the most, knowing they were witnessing this. He set the grocery bag down carefully, then looked Patricia square in the eye. You don't get to decide who belongs here. Not you. Not ever. Patricia's nostrils flared, her face a mask of fury. But before she could fire back, the distant wail of sirens returned, louder now, echoing down the street. Lights flashed faintly against the evening sky. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. Phones angled higher. The show was about to reach its climax. And Darius, standing tall in the center of it all, knew the storm was only just beginning. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the neat rows of windows as the police cruiser rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. The siren cut off with a sharp chirp, but the air was already electric. Neighbors leaned forward on their porches, phones lifted higher, the glow of their screens capturing every second. The neighborhood had turned into an audience, and the stage was Darius's driveway. Patricia straightened like a soldier preparing for inspection. She smoothed her blouse, lifted her chin, and plastered a look of righteous indignation across her face. Finally, she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Now this nonsense will be dealt with. Melissa instinctively pulled the children closer, whispering for them to stay calm. Their wide eyes glistened with fear, reflecting the approaching headlights. Darius glanced back at them and gave the smallest nod, a silent promise that everything would be okay. But in his chest, his heart thudded like a war drum. Two officers stepped out of the cruiser, hands resting casually near their belts. Their expressions were neutral, but years of experience told Darius they were already assessing the scene, one angry accuser, one composed man at the center, and a crowd hungry for drama. Patricia wasted no time. She rushed forward, heels clacking against the pavement. Officers, she cried, pointing a trembling finger at Darius. There he is! That man does not live here. He's been trespassing, lurking, and frightening the neighborhood. I demand you arrest him immediately. Her voice cracked with urgency, every word sharp enough to slice through the murmurs of the crowd. Gasps rippled, phones zoomed in, and all eyes shifted to Darius. The lead officer, tall and broad, held up a hand. Ma'am, step back. We'll handle this. His tone was firm, professional, but Patricia puffed up, unwilling to yield her spotlight. Robert hurried forward before Patricia could escalate further. Officers, hold on. You've got it wrong. He's not trespassing. This is Darius. He lives here, right in this house. He's my neighbor. Patricia spun on him, her eyes blazing. Robert, stop covering for him. You've been duped. Look at him, does he look like someone who belongs in this neighborhood? Her words landed like a slap, the ugliness of them echoing louder than she realized. Several neighbors flinched. A woman in the back shifted uncomfortably, lowering her phone just slightly. But again, silence held them captive. No one else spoke up. The officer turned his attention to Darius, who stood tall beside his car. Sir, can I see some identification? Melissa gasped softly, clutching the children tighter. Darius raised a calming hand toward her before speaking. His voice was steady, measured. Of course, officer. I'll be glad to show you. Patricia smirked triumphantly, as though the request itself had already proven her right. See? If he really lived here, you wouldn't need to ask. Patricia, Robert snapped, his patience finally cracking, you're embarrassing yourself. But Patricia was already addressing the crowd, raising her voice like a preacher at a pulpit. This is what I've been warning about. We have to protect our homes, our children. If people like him can just walk in here, what's next? Break-ins? Crime in our streets? Her words hung heavy, venomous, infecting the quiet like poison. Some neighbors shifted uneasily, others shook their heads. Yet not one person besides Robert found the courage to push back. Fear and indifference held their tongues hostage. Darius inhaled slowly, keeping his composure. He reached for his wallet, pulling it from his pocket with deliberate calm. But he didn't hand it over just yet. Instead, he looked Patricia directly in the eye. I've told you, he said, voice even but resonant, this is my home. My wife, my children, my life are here. Nothing you say will change that. The lead officer extended his hand for the ID. Darius's gaze lingered on Patricia a moment longer before lowering his wallet. His fingers brushed against the smooth edge of something tucked behind his driver's license, something he rarely revealed unless he had to. The crowd leaned in, breaths caught, cameras recording. Patricia folded her arms, satisfied. Finally, we'll have proof. Finally, the truth will come out. She had no idea just how right she was. The flashing lights painted the cul-de-sac in restless red and blue. Every window on the block seemed alive with faces pressed against glass, watching. The officers stood poised, the tension in the air so thick it clung to the skin like humidity before a storm. The lead officer stepped closer to Darius, hand outstretched. Sir, I'll need to see some identification. Patricia hovered behind him like a shadow, her smug smile widening. Yes, check him. I've been telling you all along. He doesn't live here. He's a threat. Arrest him before he causes trouble. Melissa's voice broke from the porch, trembling but firm. This is his home. You have no right to. Darius lifted a calming hand, his eyes never leaving the officers. It's all right, Mel. I've got this. He pulled his wallet from his pocket and carefully slid out his driver's license. The officer glanced at it under the glow of his flashlight, his expression unreadable. He gave a curt nod and handed it back. All right, the officer said. This checks out. Your name matches the address. The crowd stirred, whispers rising like the rustle of wind through trees. For a brief moment, Patricia's confident mask faltered. But she recovered quickly, stepping forward with renewed venom. No. That doesn't prove anything. IDs can be faked. He probably stole that wallet. Look at him, he doesn't belong in this neighborhood. He can't. Her words cut through the murmurs, sharp and ugly. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, lowering their phones. But still, no one else intervened. Robert clenched his fists. For God's sake, Patricia. You're making a fool of yourself. What more proof do you need? Patricia sneered. Proof that he's not lying. That he's not dangerous. That's all I've ever asked for. Darius exhaled slowly, his patience stretched thin. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. But the moment Patricia spat the word dangerous, his decision was made. With deliberate calm, he slid the wallet open further. A thin, leather badge holder gleamed faintly under the police lights. He flipped it open and held it up. The gold and blue emblem of the Federal Bureau of Investigation caught the glow, shining like a spotlight in the night. The effect was instant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in, hands trembling to capture the moment. The officers stiffened, their neutral stance shifting into one of deference. The lead officer's eyes widened before he stepped back, nodding respectfully. Agent Johnson, he said, voice tight with sudden formality. Why didn't you say so sooner? Patricia's face drained of color. Her jaw worked soundlessly, lips opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. No. No, you can't be. Robert couldn't help the grin spreading across his face. Told you, he muttered, loud enough for the neighbors closest to hear. Darius's voice was calm, but beneath the surface, steel rang through his words. I didn't feel the need to announce my job. I was just unloading groceries in my own driveway. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crickets seemed to pause, waiting. Patricia stumbled backward a step, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. Her eyes darted around the circle of neighbors, searching desperately for support, but found only blank stares and murmurs. The authority she had once wielded so easily had evaporated in an instant. The second officer, younger and visibly uneasy, cleared his throat. Sir, we apologize for the misunderstanding. Darius nodded curtly. Noted. He snapped his badge holder shut with finality, sliding it back into his wallet. Melissa exhaled a shaky breath from the porch, relief washing across her face. The children clung to her, their eyes wide with awe and confusion. Patricia tried one last time, her voice cracking under the weight of desperation. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. I didn't know. No, Darius interrupted, his gaze cutting into her. You didn't know. And instead of asking, you accused. Instead of listening, you assumed. And in front of my wife and children, you tried to turn this community against me. His words landed heavier than any shout could have. Patricia's shoulders sagged, her power stripped away by her own arrogance. The crowd erupted into whispers, the tide shifting before her eyes. Phones stayed trained on her, capturing every flinch, every stumble. She turned, trembling, and tried to retreat, but the weight of humiliation clung to her like chains. And as the officers stepped back toward their cruiser, it was clear to everyone, the queen of the HOA had just been dethroned. The night air seemed to thicken after Darius's badge snapped shut. The street, once filled with murmurs and suspicion, now buzzed with an entirely different energy, shock, awe, and something Patricia had never felt before in her reign over the neighborhood, scorn. Patricia's mouth worked silently, her face pale and drawn tight as she clutched her clipboard like a shield. The woman who had just been demanding arrests now looked like a schoolgirl caught cheating on a test. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words died in her throat. Robert stepped forward, his voice dripping with mockery. Well, Karen, there's your proof. Not only does he live here, he's also someone who spends his days protecting this entire country. Meanwhile, you're out here harassing him over groceries. A ripple of laughter broke through the tension, nervous at first, but then growing bolder. Neighbors who had been silent moments ago now smirked, whispering to each other. Some held their phones high, catching Patricia's collapse in high definition. Patricia snapped her head toward them, eyes wide and pleading. You can't let this go public. This isn't what it looks like. I was just doing my duty as HOA president. I was protecting our community. Protecting us from what? A woman's voice rang out from the crowd. From our own neighbor? From the man who mows his lawn every Saturday and waves at our kids when they ride by? Another voice chimed in. From the guy who shoveled your driveway last winter when you couldn't get your car out? The murmurs grew sharper, like daggers flying in Patricia's direction. Her defenses cracked with each word. Melissa finally descended the porch steps, her children clinging to her skirt. Her eyes, wet with tears of fear and relief, burned into Patricia's. You humiliated my husband in front of our children. You made them believe their father was in danger just for being at home. You owe him, and them, an apology. Patricia's lips trembled, but no apology came. Pride, her oldest companion, fought desperately against reason. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she stammered. Darius's voice cut through the night, low and firm. But it did happen. And it happens every day to people who look like me, who don't have a badge to fall back on. The difference is, tonight you chose the wrong man. His words landed like a hammer. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, the weight of unspoken truths settling in the pit of their stomachs. Phones continued to record, the glow of their screens capturing every ounce of Patricia's unraveling. The lead officer, still lingering by his cruiser, finally spoke. "Ma'am, this situation escalated because of assumptions you made. That's dangerous, for him, for his family, and for this community. You should think about that." The rebuke, quiet but authoritative, shattered the last of Patricia's composure. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered onto the asphalt, the sound echoing louder than it should have. Robert bent, picked it up, and held it out mockingly. "I think this belongs to you, President." She didn't take it. Instead, Patricia backed away, muttering under her breath, her once straight posture hunched like the weight of the neighborhood's judgment had broken her spine. The children tugged at Melissa's hand, whispering questions, their small voices piercing the silence. Melissa knelt down, wrapping them in her arms. "It's okay," she whispered, though her eyes stayed locked on Patricia. "Daddy's safe. Daddy's always been safe." One by one, the neighbors began to drift back to their homes, the spectacle over, though the story would linger far longer than the night itself. The glow of phone screens faded, but everyone knew the videos would surface online before sunrise. Darius remained still in the driveway, his badge tucked away, his dignity intact. He had said what needed to be said. There was nothing more to prove. Patricia, trembling and defeated, finally turned and shuffled into the shadows, her footsteps heavy with shame. For the first time since she crowned herself queen of the HOA, she had no audience left to command, no allies to defend her. And as the last car pulled away and the police cruisers rolled quietly out of the cul-de-sac, the truth hung in the night air, undeniable and irreversible. Patricia had tried to expose a trespasser. Instead, she had exposed herself. The videos hit social media before the night was even over. By sunrise, the neighborhood wasn't just gossiping, it was buzzing. Phones rang, group chats exploded, and the HOA's email inbox flooded with complaints. Patricia had built her little kingdom on control, enforcing fines for grass an inch too high, banning certain paint colors, lecturing parents about community standards. But now, her authority was crumbling. By the time the emergency HOA meeting was called, the room at the local community center was packed. Residents filled every chair, spilled into the aisles, and stood against the walls. The air smelled of coffee, tension, and something sharp, justice waiting to be served. Patricia sat at the head of the long folding table, her once impeccable composure replaced by flushed cheeks and darting eyes. Her clipboard sat in front of her, the same one that had slipped from her grip the night before. She tried to hold it as if nothing had changed, but her knuckles were white with strain. Robert leaned back in his chair near the front, arms crossed, lips curled in satisfaction. Melissa sat beside Darius, her hand resting gently on his, a silent anchor. The crowd buzzed until someone finally stood up. Patricia, a tall man from the back began, his voice steady but sharp, "You owe this community an explanation." Dozens of heads turned toward her. Phones were raised, ready to record. Patricia cleared her throat, fumbling for her usual condescension, but it came out brittle. I was protecting the neighborhood. I thought I saw suspicious activity. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean," a woman interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "We all saw the video. You didn't just accuse him. You humiliated him. You called the police on a man standing in his own driveway. In front of his wife. His kids." Patricia's face reddened. "I didn't know he was FBI. If I had." "That's the point." Robert cut in, his voice booming. "You shouldn't have to be FBI to be treated with basic respect. What if he wasn't? What if he was just any other black man unloading groceries? What then, Patricia?" The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement. A woman near the front raised her phone higher, nodding along. Another man shouted, "Yeah, Karen, what then?" Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked smaller now, swallowed by the very authority she once wielded. The HOA secretary, a soft-spoken woman who rarely challenged Patricia, cleared her throat. We've received 32 written complaints in the past 12 hours. 32. From our own residents. Patricia, this is more than a misunderstanding. This is misconduct. The word misconduct hung heavy in the air. It wasn't just judgment anymore, it was a charge. Melissa finally rose to her feet, her voice calm but firm. My children watched their father be accused of being a criminal because of the color of his skin. They thought he was going to be taken away from them. That fear doesn't go away, Patricia. It doesn't vanish because you say you were just doing your job. The room went silent. Patricia stared at Melissa, her lips trembling, but no defense came. For the first time, she had nothing. The HOA secretary folded her hands. Effective immediately, I motioned to remove Patricia as HOA president for abuse of authority and conduct unbecoming of this community. I second that, Robert said instantly. All in favor? Nearly every hand in the room shot up, a sea of fingers pointing upward like a unanimous verdict. A handful hesitated, but when they saw the cameras recording, even they raised their hands. All opposed? Not a single hand moved. Patricia's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stumbled to her feet. You can't do this. I built this HOA. I kept order here. Without me, this neighborhood will fall apart. No, Robert said, standing now, his voice calm but final. Without you, this neighborhood finally has a chance to come together. The applause that followed was thunderous. Neighbors clapped, some even cheered. Patricia stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, before she finally grabbed her clipboard and stormed toward the door. Cameras followed her exit, catching every flinch, every stumble. Darius remained seated, silent, his hand still resting in Melissa's. He hadn't asked for this spectacle, but as the meeting dissolved into chatter and relief, he knew one thing for certain: justice, at least here, had been served. And as Patricia disappeared from the building, stripped of her title and her power, the community she once ruled over with an iron grip began to breathe a little easier. The days following Patricia's downfall carried a strange quiet. The cul-de-sac that had once echoed with her clipped voice and constant reprimands now felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted from the air. For the first time in years, neighbors greeted each other without glancing over their shoulders, afraid of being fined for weeds or mismatched blinds. But for Darius and his family, the relief was more complicated. Melissa stood on the porch one morning, watching their children chase each other across the yard. Their laughter rang clear, but she could still see the fear that had etched itself into their faces that night, the way their small bodies had clung to her, the way their eyes had widened when police lights bathed their home in red and blue. Darius joined her, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. He slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "They'll be all right," he murmured, though the heaviness in his voice betrayed his own doubts. Melissa leaned into him. "Will they?" They saw their father accused like a criminal on his own property. That doesn't just vanish. He didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on their children, then shifted to the neighbors across the street. A few waved sheepishly, as though trying to apologize with gestures instead of words. Darius gave a small nod, not out of forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, Robert stopped by. He carried a box of donuts and a smile that didn't quite mask the guilt in his eyes. "Figured the kids deserved something sweet," he said, handing the box over. Melissa welcomed him inside, but Darius lingered at the doorway. "You were the only one who spoke up, Robert. The rest just stood there. Watching. Recording. Waiting." Robert lowered his gaze. "I know. And I hate it. People are quick to hit record, but slow to stand beside someone when it matters. I should have done more. We all should have." Darius sighed, his shoulders loosening. "At least you tried. That's more than most." The three sat at the kitchen table, the children tearing into the donuts with joy, oblivious to the heavy conversation. For a moment, normalcy returned, coffee cups clinking, sugar dusting the table, laughter echoing against the walls. But beneath it all, a truth simmered: wounds had been made, and healing would take time. That weekend, the community gathered in the park. Not an official meeting, no clipboards, no fines, just families on picnic blankets, children darting between swings, neighbors actually talking. Some approached Darius and Melissa with tentative smiles, offering apologies, baked goods, or awkward words of support. One woman, the same who had once whispered nervously in Patricia's shadow, pressed a hand to her chest as she spoke. "I'm sorry for staying silent. I was scared of her. Scared of rocking the boat. But watching what she did to you. I won't stay silent again." Melissa's eyes softened, though pain still flickered there. "Silence is easy," she said quietly. "Speaking up is hard. But silence lets injustice grow." Darius added, his voice firm but kind, "It's not enough to not be part of the problem. You have to be part of the solution." That night could have ended very differently. The words hung in the air, sinking into the hearts of those gathered. A few nodded, others shifted uncomfortably, but no one could deny the truth. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold, Darius and Melissa gathered their children, leading them home. The kids ran ahead, carefree again, their laughter chasing away the shadows of that night. On the porch, Melissa paused, looking back at the park where neighbors lingered, talking more openly than ever before. "Do you think things will really change?" she asked. Darius squeezed her hand. "Change is slow. But sometimes it takes one ugly truth to wake people up." Patricia exposed hers for everyone to see. "Now the rest of us have to decide what we'll do with that." Melissa rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes following their children as they darted inside. "As long as they grow up knowing their father stood tall, I think that's enough." Darius watched the neighborhood settle into twilight, the echoes of the past week fading but never gone. Prejudice had scarred his family, but dignity had carried them through. And in that truth lay both a warning and a promise. Hate divides. Silence enables. But courage, quiet, steady courage, heals. And though the night had been long, dawn had finally come.